we're not going to have enough time to actually go into the the Bible and religion the way that I would like to, because I was raised very Christian, doing
Hmm.
Bible study, hanging out with my bros, talking about Jesus, sharing scriptures and such. Then got into like psychedelics and kind of Buddhism and like other versions of isms, and that kind of the concept of like hell seems quite unreasonable. So I wonder your perspective on the how literal could one take the Bible from your perspective? Like, is it meant to be symbolism, metaphor, allegory? Is it meant to be 100% literal? How does one define how literal the Bible is,
So
or
I don't.
the
What
Quran,
do you
or
mean, like the literal thing? I hate that word. First of all, the word literal means according to the text. Like that's what the word literal means. People think that the word literal means that what is described is a description of events in the way that I think events should be described. And sometimes I'm not even sure what that is. It's like the way that you would describe events to a police officer, maybe, like if it was the scene of a crime, some kind of forensic, like encyclopedic description of an event. Like that's what it should be. And so we think that when we say the Bible is literal, then that's what we're describing. And I think that that's not it's just not what's going on there. Right? The Bible is definitely a description of events, but it's not trying to describe those events in a way that would satisfy a modern rationalist in any way. Like it is a description of events which compresses elements together in order to make them meaningful over a very long span of time. And so because of that, they have a certain form and a certain trope, which is necessary. Because if you don't do that, if you don't compress elements of a story into something like universal imagery, then no one's going to understand it. So think about like if someone from the 15th century watched Pulp Fiction, like they would have no idea what they're watching. Like, what am I watching? What are these things people have in their hands? And what are these things that people are drawing, like putting up their nose, or like, what are they, what is this? Like, this doesn't mean anything because it's so idiosyncratic. In the Bible, what you have is you have stories that have been compressed and condensed and are telling the events in a way that's just what it is. And so the idea that the first chapter of Genesis is like could be seen as a scientific description is absolute nonsense. Like it's complete nonsense. And so I'm sorry to all the creationists who think that that's what's going on there. It's just not. It's just not. But the problem is that it doesn't have to be. The idea that that's what's valuable, the idea that a scientific description of an event is what is supremely valuable and everything should conform to that standard is pure nonsense. And so the description of, let's say, the creation in the first chapter of Genesis is, I think, is the most powerful and accurate description of the manner in which the world exists. But it is not doing it in a way that, like I said, it's not a biologist description. It's a description of a hierarchy of meaning, a hierarchy of participation, the centrality of consciousness, the centrality of recognizing the good in the world. These things have nothing to do with what, let's say, have very little to do with the way that a kind of forensic description would be. So I think that all the stories in Scripture have to be taken very seriously. They have to be taken seriously as a description of events, but we don't have to figure out what the mechanical causes are behind some of the things that are there. So people are like reading. So like, I don't know, you read in the book of Joshua that the sun stopped, for 24 hours. And people are like, well, how is that possible? Trying to figure out like how the earth could move and what this could happen. How could I describe the mechanical causation of that? It's like, dude, stop it. What are you doing? Who cares? There's a reason why things are described that way. The reason have to do with their meaning. And so you don't have to understand what it is that if you had a video camera, you would be filming and you could capture on a video camera. But it also doesn't mean that what it's saying is just something someone made up. It's a description of something in a way that emphasizes its meaning and it's So it's a kind of mythological language, but in the Bible, at least, they're describing some kind of event, maybe from a distance, maybe from several generations after, maybe from that type of memory, but it is a memory of something.
Yeah, I have an analogy, and it's too bad we only have a little bit of time left because I feel like this would be. I'm like unpacking something that would be probably several hours of conversation. So maybe we can come back another time or something. But an example that's come to mind is like last night. I've been writing my dreams down. Last night I had a dream where I was like in this German war zone scenario, and I was like on my hands and knees and crawling around through puddles and hiding behind car tire things, and I had a gun and I like lost the gun and I was trying to find the gun, and then I had to report back. It was all this stuff. And within that, I think if I were to like retrace and be like, okay, I need to understand this dream. So I'm going to go to Germany. I'm going to try to find this place. I'm going to try to like encounter this guy. It's like, no. Like, no, it was like,
Identify
there was truth.
like which gun it is.
There was
like,
truth within the dream. It just wasn't exactly as, literal as like your waking consciousness may want to define it as, is kind of what I'm maybe perhaps gathering. And that might be a little bit of a stretch, but
even like your waking consciousness now. So think about how right now, let's say around you, there's millions of things happening at the same time. There's like billions and billions of things happening simultaneously around you. And so in order for you to make sense of that, you have to draw phenomena into coherent, through a coherent line. So even if it's just your day, like you went through your day, you get home, like there are millions of things that happen to you that day, like millions and millions and millions. And so, but then you tell the story of your day. What you're going to do is you're going to compress. You're going to take the elements that are meaningful, and you're going to compress them together in a manner in which you are going to show the line that connects these elements together. Okay, so that's how we do it. Now think of that now over 1,000 years instead of over one day. Think of how I can do that in a manner in which I would have to tell the story of my day to someone in 1,000 years. And so there's a kind of compression that happens. And that compression doesn't mean that it's, like I said, it doesn't mean that you didn't have a day or that, but it means that there are so many examples that I could give you. But like, let's say a simple example would be, let's say in that story of the German story, your dream, you're trying to tell that to someone. You're trying to tell that to someone who's a Maasai in Kenya, right? From 500 years ago. And so are you going to say you had a gun? No, you're going to say I had a weapon, right? You're going to say something like I had a weapon in my hands. But that Maasai, they only understand a weapon to be something like a lance.
But they might have the same dream or a totally different dream with the same like undercurrent of truth.
They'll have a lance in their hand instead of a gun.
Yeah.
And so that's the type of contraction that I'm saying. It's like if I say a sword, that has way more power than if I say a Glock, because a Glock is like a super reduced version. And even if I say a gun is better than if I name like the brand of the thing. It's like it's this compression of elements that is what ancient storytelling was doing and is what you find in scripture. So some of them reach levels that are so high, like a serpent, like a tree, like a garden. These elements are now universal and so compressed.
I'm going to